My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to the Big Talker Network at BigTalker.live. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Saturday at 1 p.m. and each Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, castle doctrine and stand your ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. Again, that's grnc.org. Later in today's show, our guest will be John Crump, who writes for the excellent gun-related news service, ammoland.com. John will discuss his many probing investigations into abuses by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives under the Biden administration. But first, this just in gun rights news. You heard it here. My organization, Grassroots North Carolina, the state's primary gun rights group, announced yesterday that we are preparing a second lawsuit against Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden over continued delays in concealed handgun permits. Pursuant to the first suit, McFadden is currently subject to a June 8, 2022 consent order requiring him to process North Carolina pistol purchase permit applications within 14 calendar days, as required by law, and issue permits to qualified applicants immediately, as required under GS 14-404F. It also requires him to take fingerprints on the same day that a concealed handgun applicant presents at the sheriff's office for fingerprinting. The third item is that it makes all requests for mental health records for concealed handgun applicants within 10 calendar days of receiving the application as required by GS 14-415.15a. Fourth, issue or deny concealed handgun applications within 45 calendar days and receipt of mental health records as required by 14-415a. And it further enjoins McFadden from otherwise violating state law with respect to issuing pistol purchase permits and concealed handgun permits. Well, in apparent defiance of the consent order binding him as the result of our last lawsuit, Sheriff Gary McFadden continues to delay concealed handgun permits up to a year, despite a law stipulating permits be issued in 45 days. Because none of the other 99 North Carolina counties are experiencing similar delays, we have concluded that McFadden appears to be flooding the Veterans Administration with requests for mental health records, even for applicants who have never served in the military. A provision in the majority opinion in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which struck down much of that state's may issue concealed handgun law, it creates a cause of action even against shall issue permit systems like North Carolina's if the issuing authority unduly delays permits. We believe that to be the case in Mecklenburg County and are preparing litigation on that basis. Elsewhere in the news, Governor Kathy Hochul and the state of New York just don't get it. You may recall that the Supreme Court struck down the New York's restrictive handgun permit law in the state case I just mentioned, namely New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. You would think that they would have learned their lesson. But no, not leftists, oh no. They are so blinded by their obsession with controlling you that they just double down on a losing hand, which is exactly what New York did when they passed a bill with the truly Orwellian title of the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, which improved concealed carry by virtually prohibiting it throughout the state, including making all of Times Square a so-called sensitive area where carry is a felony. Here we go again. This time with Gun Owners of America, American citizen and New York resident Ivan Antonik, and two sister organizations filing for a temporary restraining order. Well, according to Dean Weingarten, writing in AmmoLand.com last week, Judge Glenn T. Sotheby issued that TRO to prevent New York State from implementing its latest violations of the Constitution. In his opinion, Sotheby struck down most of the new law, particularly noting that its new good moral character requirement is at least as onerous as the good cause requirement struck down in Bruin, and further noting that its law violated the Bruin decision's requirement that infringements on Second Amendment rights must have historical antecedents. And he said, and I quote, "The court begins its analysis of this provision by acknowledging that the apparent dearth of historical analogs requiring a responsible, law-abiding citizen to provide character references in order to be permitted to carry a gun. However, just as lacking, it appears, are historical analogs requiring a responsible, law-abiding citizen to even apply to be able to carry a gun." Sotheby also put a stay on New York's vast, sensitive areas, leaving intact bans on carry only in government buildings, polling places, public places of worship, public areas restricted from the general public for a limited time, schools, and fenced-in farmland or hunting preserves. The opinion specifically rejected bans on carry on public transportation, private property, places of entertainment or amusement, including where alcohol is served. Oh yes, and the entirety of Times Square. Sotheby explicitly rejected New York's ban on carry on private property unless the owner posted a firearms allowed sign, noting that the state was making their decision for the private property owners in violation of the First Amendment. Now, New York's next move remains to be seen, but I have every confidence that the game of legislative whack-a-mole will continue until we pass legislation requiring public officials to pay a personal price for their transgressions. And, in late-breaking news, the Bruin decision is the gift that keeps on giving. On October 14th, the Epoch Times reported that U.S. District Judge Joseph Goodwin in Charleston, West Virginia, just struck down an unconstitutional 18 U.S. Code Section 922K, which prohibits possession of a firearm or transporting a firearm with a serial number that has been altered, obliterated, or removed across state lines. It also prohibits them from possessing such a gun if it has ever been transported across state lines. Well, the decision comes in a criminal case involving an Ohio man, Randy Price, whose gun had had its serial number removed when it was found in his car at a traffic stop in Charleston. Because serial numbers were only required on firearms since passage of the 1968 Gun Control Act, Goodwin ruled that there was no historical antecedent requiring guns to be serialized in 1791, thereby failing the historical test laid out in the Bruin decision. We will happily continue to report as restrictive gun laws fall in the wake of Bruin. Well, folks, Election Day, November 8th, is fast approaching. And gun rights supporters need to understand that this midterm is for all the marbles. That's why Grassroots North Carolina has expanded its Remember in November voter education campaign. This year, we are distributing 150,000 voter guides covering all candidates for state and federal office. Remember in November uses an objective candidate evaluation system in which gun-related voting records, bill sponsorship history, and survey scores are entered into a database which estimates how often a given candidate can be expected to agree with a control group of our own life and benefactor members. A candidate who agrees at least 90% of the time gets 4 stars, 80% 3 stars, on down the list. Now, you can get the GRNC candidate evaluations by clicking on the Remember in November icon at the top of our homepage at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. You can get the candidates sorted by either district or by alphabetically by name. You can also get paper guides either for yourself or in larger numbers to distribute to clubs and associations by going to grnc.org/distribute voter guides. But it's distribute-voter-guides. So again, grnc.org/distribute-voter-guides. And that we will send you as many guides as you think you can distribute. One critical statewide race is the U.S. Senate race to fill the open seat left by retiring Senator Richard Burr. This pits gun shop owner and pro-gun conservative Ted Budd against Sherry Beasley, the leftist former Supreme Court Chief Justice that has vowed to become the 51st vote to end the filibuster. Very important you vote for Ted Budd. Equally important are several statewide judicial races. Right now, the Democrats control the Supreme Court, and they've been striking down political districts drawn by Republicans in an effort to elect more leftist candidates to Congress and the General Assembly. 2 of those seats are now up for election. One of them is open seat, and we recommend Richard Dietz, D-I-E-T-Z, Richard Dietz, and for the other seat, Trey Allen. Right now, you're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on the Big Talker Network at BigTalker.live. After a short break, we will return with our guest John Crump of AmmoLand.com, who will discuss his ongoing investigation into BATFE abuses. My name is Paul Balone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on the Big Talker Network at BigTalker.live. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. We are honored to have as our guest today John Crump. John is an NRA instructor and constitutional activist. He is the host of the John Crump Live podcast, which you can find at JohnCrumpLive.com. He's also an Amazon best-selling author. And pertinent to our discussion today, he writes for AmmoLand.com, the excellent firearms-related news source. John has done a series of exposés on the abuses of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives that I think we will want to talk about. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
So, your articles on leaks and abuses at the ATF are almost too numerous to name. I mean, you've done stuff on the intimidating visits by ATF agents I'd like to talk about, photographing the federal firearms licensees' bound books in an attempt to create an illegal gun registry, leaks by apparent whistleblowers alarmed at the politicization of the ATF under the Biden administration, and, of course, the dramatic increase in FFL revocations under Biden. So, first, let me ask you how you know so much about the inner workings of the ATF. How does that happen?
Sources. Sources.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the ATF that aren't exactly anti-gun. There's a lot of people that joined the ATF to do stuff like the investigation that was done at the Atlanta bombing during the Olympics and catching real bad guys that want to do real harm. And they find themselves in an organization that is political and targeting everyday average Americans with crimes that doesn't really hurt anyone. If you own a solvent trap, does that make you a criminal? I don't think so. They don't think so, but the ATF does. A lot of the people are tasked with going around and collecting force reset triggers, for example, and some of those guys don't see the big deal of force reset triggers. They don't think that they're machine guns, but yet they are tasked with carrying out the ATF's political will.
And so I guess that leads us to how, in your opinion, has the ATF changed under the Biden administration?
They have not changed that much. What I will say is they are emboldened to do the things that they've always wanted to do. During the transition period, the ATF met with the Biden administration, and the Biden administration asked them what their top goals were, and their top goals were unfinished frames and firearms, which are known as 80% firearms, and also pistol braces. And if you look at the first 2 moves that Biden did was to go after the frames market and the pistol brace market.
And how about this? I've heard that there's a 500% increase in FFL revocations, and I actually know some lawyers that are specializing in going to these and doing these hearings. What kind of feedback are you getting on that?
Yeah, the revocations are up tremendously. Right now, Biden decided he wanted to crack down on so-called rogue dealers. So right now, the IOIs are pulling IOIs as industry operations investigators. They are pulling FFLs from gun shops for little clerical errors. Before Biden's whole war on FFLs, they could use their discretion. If they saw something that was wrong, like a typo or whatnot, or something that was just checked wrong, and they knew it was just a honest mistake, they could use their discretion just to give the FFLs a warning. That discretion is gone. In the new IOI manual, the word discretion has been totally removed, so they have no discretion. If they find a mistake, that's it, basically. They can't use their discretion to give them a warning. They have to give them the harshest punishment possible, which in a lot of cases is revocation of the FFLs. That's why we have seen a 500% increase in the revocations of FFLs.
Wasn't it previously in the language that it had to be a willful violation, something that was actually intentional rather than a simple paper clerical error? Wasn't that previously the case?
Yeah, that was the case. Now it doesn't matter. You can get your FFL pulled for anything.
You know,
and they are pulling them.
I'll date myself here, but the last time I remember this happening was during the Clinton administration when they wanted to round up what they called so-called kitchen table gun dealers, and they started using zoning requirements to drive FFLs out of business. I know personally several guys that gave up their FFLs during that period of time. So I guess the idea here is that if they can't choke off the firearms themselves, they'll choke off the points of sale. It's lovely. Recently, we had a FOIA request, I think by GOA, and I think there was another one from Congress, and I think our own Representative Ted Budd was involved in one of those, that caused the ATF to admit that it has something like 920 million transaction records. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what the ATF is doing?
Yeah, what happened was a year before the FOIA request came back, I was contacted by someone in the out-of-business office that says, hey, we're scanning all these records. Basically, Walmart was shutting down a bunch of their stores with FFLs, the FFL portions of their stores, about 20% of it. And they were shipping all the records to the ATF. The ATF was then taking the 4473s and scanning them in. So GOA, they saw the article, so they FOIA'd the information. And what it turned out was that the out-of-business office had over 920 million records, close to 1 billion records, and almost 700 million of them were digitally scanned, and they're being stored in PDF format. Now, the ATF says, hey, they're scanned in PDF format, they're not OCR'd, but if you have Adobe, it's 3 clicks and you can OCR everything. So basically, they have a legal gun registry there because they can turn it on. And they do turn it on. Whenever they receive a trace request, they turn on the OCR so they can search the serial number or whatnot and find the gun. Now, if they can turn that on and off, and they're saying, well, we're leaving it off unless we receive a trace request. To me, that is still a registry and it's still a searchable database.
No, I think I would agree. When the ATF says, trust us, we won't search it by name, but the optical character recognition stuff just, it makes it an obvious registry. And correct me if I'm wrong, but at least under the McClure-Volkmer Act of 1986, the Firearms Owners Protection Act, and also under the 1993 Brady Law and possibly some other laws, it is illegal for the ATF to create a gun registry, is it not?
That is 100% true. They're claiming that it's not a gun registry. It's just basically a searchable database, so don't worry about it. Yeah, they just claim it's not a registry.
Now,
but
let me ask you a question.
It is a legal registry.
And another question. Do you think that they are retaining transaction records from the computerized National Instant Background Check System, kind of like Janet Reno did when the system first came around?
Talking to my sources in the FBI, they're not retaining those records. They are and they aren't. they're retaining them for 87 days, and then it gets dumped out of the system. And I know a source that works very, very closely with that, and it is a very trusted source.
Okay, so
as of right now, no, but I can see them doing that. Well, they don't even have to, really, if you think about it. If you look at the new rule, they have a new rule coming out that says the ATF has to be granted, like unrestricted access, unlimited access to your 4473s if you store them electronically, and they're pushing FFLs to store 4473s electronically, especially since they can't store records offsite anymore, and they have to keep records indefinitely.
Where they used to be able to destroy them after 20 years, now they're required to keep them indefinitely on site. Is that the case?
Correct.
Correct.
See. Yeah. You used to be able to get a waiver also to be able to store them off-site, but they said no. But they will let you store them on your computer, but you have to let the FBI have the keys to the castle, basically.
Gee, what's the worst that could happen? Huh?
Or ATF.
I got it. What's the worst that could happen? Anyways, so it does appear that they're building an illegal gun registry. It does appear, I'm glad to hear they're not maintaining transaction records from NICS, but what's magic about 87 days exactly? I thought that the records were supposed to be expunged within 24 hours.
No, the FBI's internal documentation says 90 days, so they're doing it at day 87.
I see. Okay. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and finish this up. Right now, folks, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on the Big Talker Network at bigtalker.live. After a short break, we will return with John Crump and more on the abuses of the ATF. My name is Paul Vlone. You're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on the Big Talker Network at bigtalker.live. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. We are honored to have as our guest today John Crump, and we are discussing some of the abuses at the ATF he's discovered. Now, John, you've said that they're maintaining this illegal gun registry because they've got all these records, 920 million records, scanned into PDFs that are searchable by optical character recognition. Why don't you tell people why they should worry about this illegal gun registry? What do you think the intent is on registering these guns?
Well, the old saying goes, registration always leads to confiscation. And they always say, no one's coming for your guns. No one's coming for your guns. I hear that a lot from the anti-gun side, but yet they always end up coming for your guns. Solvent traps, for example, they're coming up with solvent traps, force-free fit triggers. Mm-hmm. They want to ban ARs and AKs, all sorts of modern sporting rifles. They want to ban the semi-automatic bans. So they want to ban all this stuff. And if they know where all of it is, what do you think that they're going to do? They're going to come get it. And we have seen the ATF come get things that were once legal, and all of a sudden they determine it's illegal now. You look at the frames and receivers rule. Those were always legal, and now they're illegal to sell a blank frame and a jig together.
Right.
So they have a tendency to change their minds a lot. Bump stock, they changed their mind on bump stocks. Now, if you register your bump stock, I'm pretty sure they would have probably shown up.
Yeah, without a doubt. As I tell people, you can't ban what you can't find. And so the idea is that they need to be able to find this stuff. And in fact, isn't that happening to some of the people in New York State after they, of course, now there's a stay on it, but when they passed the Concealed Carry Improvement, what an Orwellian name that is, weren't they sending letters to some of the business owners that had permits in some of these so-called sensitive areas like Times Square? Did I see something on that? I think maybe you might have written.
Yep, you did. I got a leak from one of my sources in New York. I have leaks everywhere. This letter said, hey, you are a business owner with a concealed carry permit to carry a gun at your premises, or you live in now a sensitive area. Because let's say you're a therapist, massage therapist, a physical therapist, a psychiatrist, or anyone that works out of a home office or offers drug counseling out of a home office or anything like that. your home automatically became a sensitive area. So the police sent out a letter saying you can either get rid of the gun, transfer it out of where you live, or you can just bring it to us and we'll store it for you. No problem, no cost, which is crazy because you will probably never see the firearm again. But luckily, there is a temporary restraining order that's due to go into effect as long as the stay is not issued. Loretta James filed for a stay on the TRO.
GOA is doing good work there, no doubt about it. And, Rob Olson, I guess, and some of the other lawyers, I'm very familiar with them. Although he's doing so much work on that case, I have a case here I need him to do, and they unfortunately have not had an opportunity to do it yet because we have a sheriff in one of our urban counties that is doing his dead level best to obstruct concealed handgun permits. But that's another story.
Yeah, Rob Olson is so busy right now. Talk to him. He's one of my good friends.
Yeah, I know he is, and he's a good lawyer too. I mean, they did a bang-up job for us. The last lawsuit we filed against this particular sheriff. In any case, you've talked a little bit about solvent traps and force reset triggers and whatnot. What's the ATF doing with some of the people that have got these devices? I understand they're showing up at homes. Is that true?
They are absolutely showing up at homes. I know several people. My friend Nick had them show up at his home, and I released the video. He sent me the video, and he's like, hey, this might go good on your channel. It might give you a few views if you want to use it. I don't know how much of a firestorm this will start. I don't think it's going to start any firestorm. I was like, Nick, you have no idea what you just gave me. I put it out there, and it caught on fire. And he was surprised. They ended up on TV and everything else talking about it. But, yeah, he sent me videos of the ATF showing up at his house. I've gotten other videos of the ATF showing up at other people's houses to collect solvent traps and force reset triggers. And it is a nationwide thing. Right now I'm tracking visits in 28 states, which is over half. And I'm sure the visits in the other states, I just don't have video of that. Mm-hmm. But I do have video confirmation from 28 states.
Now, so people understand, the forced reset trigger is not actually a machine gun because it requires a separate articulation of the trigger for each round. Yet this is what they're interpreting to be a machine gun. On the solvent traps, we are basically, a solvent trap is just that. It's just something to trap solvent. And people have been using these to legally build registered sound suppressors. Is that right?
That is correct. Now, here's the thing. ATF says it's not illegal to turn a solvent trap into a suppressor, but you must get a Form 1 before you get the solvent trap. But to get the Form 1, you must submit pictures of your solvent trap.
Under the definition of circular, see circular, huh? So you have to take a picture of something you're prohibited from owning to apply for the item you're prohibited from owning. Got it. Okay, makes perfect sense. Welcome to the United States government.
They make it so you can't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
So without banning it specifically, they do something like that to ban them.
Yep. But
they can say, hey, look, they're still legal.
Now, you wrote something recently about the pistol stabilizing braces and the regulation that's expected out in, I believe, December. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you discovered and how you discovered it?
Yeah, I'm by trade an engineer. So I built something I call Big Brother, which is a little device that goes out and it scrapes government websites looking for certain terms.
Okay.
And when it finds it, it returns it to me. And it returned me a form that was filed in a tax thing. So it was like buried. Mm-hmm. And they were requesting money because they are going to have an amnesty period for people to register their braced pistols as SBRs, short barrel rifles.
That's pretty clever.
So I was able to find that. Yeah.
That's very clever of you. You should include investigative journalist in your website description because that's pretty sophisticated stuff. I'm impressed.
Yeah. People keep on trying to buy it from me.
Well, suffice to say that
Maybe I'll just throw out the code.
now I can
I don't know.
I can only imagine. Now the ATF can't manage to register, Form 1s for stuff in a reasonable time now, and now they're going to have I think there are estimated 4 million pistol stabilizing braces out there. How's that going to work? You think they're going to be able to do all that in any kind of reasonable time? I don't.
Yeah, it's anywhere between 4 million and 40 million stabilizing braces out there. We're not really sure. It's going to take forever, and it's going to affect more than just these braces. It will affect anyone trying to get a Form 4, unless they're going to have a dedicated department just to do Form 4s or Form 1s. I don't know, whatever form they have. I guess it would be Form 1s.
Yeah, it'd be Form 1.
Unless they have a dedicated department just to do Form 1s for pistol stabilizing braces, and we don't know what it's going to say. Are these people going to have to not serialize, but engrave all these, or is there going to be an exemption because of that?
Right.
There's a lot of unknowns right now, and we will not know for sure until we actually see the rule, which is expected sometime at the end of December.
Okay.
From what my sources are saying. It's not totally done yet, but it's getting close.
We're coming up on time, but real quick, can you tell us, you got some breaking news. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, UPS has now changed their policies to require shippers give them unlimited access to their books regarding all firearms. And it's at their discretion and their sole discretion to what they can look at and examine. And they're saying that they're doing this to ensure compliance with federal law and UPS policy. So they're going to be able to go in there and look at your bound books, basically.
So we've got the UPS doing this. We've got credit card companies. This stuff never ends. I mean, I guess what they say about the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. At any rate, we are out of time, sir. Where can we find your stuff, your writings?
MLN.com. You can always. I have two YouTube pages. One is YouTube.com/John Crump News, and one is YouTube.com/John Crump Live, where I do my live shows. But those are the best places. But you can always visit my website at Crumpy.com, and that's about it.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate you bringing us up to speed on all this stuff, and hope to have you again soon. Folks, you are now listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on the Big Talker Network at BigTalker.live. After a short break, we will return with more information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on the Big Talker Network at BigTalker.live. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Please allow me to tell you a little story that I just wrote in my blog, The Anti-Radical, which you can find along with my book at RulesForAntiRadicals.com. I call it Selling America to the CCP Cheap. Both American media and our overtly politicized FBI seem bent on ignoring what they uniformly dismissed as Russian disinformation prior to the 2020 elections. Despite the fact that Hunter Biden's laptop has been confirmed to be quite real, Tony Bobulinski, the former Biden associate who came forward in 2020 about messages on the laptop, said the FBI has never followed up on his allegations, despite promises to do so. According to Bobulinski, in an interview with Fox News' Tucker Carlson, FBI agent Tim Tebow, in his last discussion with legal counsel, said, quote, "Listen, we know Tony's cooperating. We appreciate the information." And then he promised to follow up. Well, Tebow resigned or was fired from the FBI in August after letters of complaint written by Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, citing FBI whistleblowers who alleged Tebow slow-walked the Hunter Biden investigation. At issue, of course, is not just whether Hunter Biden, but also President Joe Biden have been compromised and potentially blackmailed by the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. First, a little history. Pay attention, because this is all quite intentionally convoluted. According to the New York Post, in the first year of the Obama administration, Hunter created Rosemont Seneca Partners, an investment firm, along with Christopher Hines, who is the stepson of Obama's future Secretary of State John Kerry, and Devon Archer, a former Kerry advisor. After Hunter visited China in 2010, Rosemont Seneca formed allegiances with three Chinese corporations: Postal Savings Bank, China Investment Corp., and Founder Corp. In 2012, Hunter and Archer forged an alliance with Chinese financier Jonathan Lee, who ran the private equity fund Bohai Capital. Their partnership was named Bohai Harvest, aptly so since 80% was controlled by Chinese state-owned interests. And harvest they did. In 2013, Hunter tagged along on China on Air Force Two with his father, where he met with Lee in what his handlers euphemistically called a social visit, even arranging a meeting between the vice president and Lee. Miraculously, or perhaps not, Bohai Harvest got its Chinese business license just 10 days later. In 2015, Hunter chummed up with Chinese tycoon Xi Jinping, the founder of Chinese energy giant CEFC. In 2017, just a month after Joe Biden left office, one of Yi's companies, State Energy HK Limited, wire transferred $6 million to Robinson Walker LLC, controlled by Rob Walker, who was a longtime business partner of Hunter's, who reportedly partnered with Biden in three other companies. Cut to 2017, when venture capitalist Tony Bobulinski was recruited by the Bidens to run Sinohawk Holdings, which Bobulinski describes as a partnership between Yi's CEFC and the Biden family. Bobulinski alleges he met twice with Joe Biden at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. And Hunter, Bobulinski alleged, quote, brings Joe over and introduces me, saying Joe's the one who's helping us with the business we're doing with the Chinese. Later in 2017, James Gilliar, another Hunter Biden business crony, sent the infamous email, later recovered from Hunter's laptop, suggesting equity shares in the venture were being assigned to Biden family members, with a note indicating that 10% would be held by Hunter for the big guy, who Bobulinski definitively identified as Joe Biden. These efforts apparently led Yi's CEFC to wire $5 million to another shadowy Biden entity, this one Hudson West, as well as $4.79 million in payments to Hunter Biden's law firm, which parceled out $1.4 million to the Lion Hall Group, a consulting firm controlled by James Biden and his wife, Sarah Biden. No corruption there. The only thing incongruous about all of this is the idea that a drug-addled wasteoid like Hunter Biden could have thought it up. But then he probably didn't. More likely it was the brainchild of his Chinese handlers. Hunter Biden's excellent adventure was by no means the first time Democrats have played footsie with Chinese spies. In the 1990s, Bill Clinton had one of the Chinese princelings sleeping in a Lincoln bedroom at roughly the same time federal agents arrested business representatives of China's two main government-owned arms companies, Norinco and Polytech Industries, for smuggling into the United States 2,000 fully automatic AK-47s. Oh, did I forget to mention that the Clinton campaign illegally got $35,000 of a pledged $300,000 from the Chinese in 1996, or that Candace Marie Claiborne, who worked under both Hillary and Bill Clinton, eventually pleaded guilty to colluding with Russian spies. And we won't mention Congressman Eric Swalwell, Democrat of California, the vocal Trump-Russia collusion narrator appointed to the House Permanent Select Intelligence Committee, who in 2020 was discovered to be dipping into a little Chinese honey trap named Fang Fang as far back as 2015. He swears he didn't tell her anything. Or Dianne Feinstein, senator from California, another Democrat, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who in 2018 was discovered to have employed a Chinese spy as her driver for 20 years. Anybody familiar with the CCP knows how intricately intertwined Chinese companies are with the Chinese government, as well as how China loves to use our own weakness, wokeness, and greed against us. But even though Chinese companies are routinely considered fronts for intelligence ops, I'm sure the many Chinese corporations paying millions of dollars to the Biden cutouts were on the up and up, right? And Chinese election fraud, orchestrated against a United States president who happened to be holding China's feet to the fire over trade and other issues, perish the thought. So we won't mention Eugene Yu, CEO of Michigan-based Conic Corp., which had a 5-year, $2.9 million contract with Los Angeles County in 2020 for its election worker management system, but was inconveniently arrested on October 4th for allegedly stealing and storing personal data of Los Angeles County election workers on servers in China. Yu is reportedly under investigation for colluding with the CCP by giving China access to the personal data of, wait for it, 2 million poll workers in the United States. What's the worst that could happen? Incidentally, Koenig also filed a lawsuit on September 12th in an attempt to silence True the Vote, the organization whose investigation of voter fraud in the 2020 elections led to the Dinesh D'Souza documentary 2,000 Mules, over what Koenig claimed were, quote, false and racist accusations. In the latest of the vast coincidences of the China-Biden Democrat story, the Epoch Times recently identified the FBI team responsible for getting Facebook to quash the Biden laptop story prior to the 2020 elections. You may recall that in an interview with Joe Rogan, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg let slip that Facebook got a, quote, warning from the FBI that the Hunter Biden laptop story was, quote, Russian propaganda, leading Facebook to limit the reach, i.e. quash the story prior to the election. Well, in August, America First Legal made a FOIA request of the FBI, requesting their communications with Facebook, and when the FBI stonewalled, AFL filed suit, alleging, and I quote, the evidence is that the FBI and big tech, including Facebook, colluded to interfere with the 2020 presidential election, first by falsely and maliciously labeling the laptop Russian disinformation, and then by censoring and or discrediting all news about its contents. According to Facebook, in its response to a subpoena in the lawsuit, the FBI entity who contacted the company to warn of Russian disinformation was the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, FITF, formed by Christopher Wray in 2017 to, quote, identify and counteract malign foreign influence operations in the United States. Wray, you may recall, has been denounced for politically weaponizing the FBI to harass Trump opponents, and in particular, those who doubt the results of the 2020 election. And who in the FITF, according to Meta, was behind the demand for the Facebook to quash the story? Well, first we have FITF supervisor Laura Demlow, I guess, but the real star of the FITF, cited in the lawsuit, has been described by the following accolades. He is an assistant special agent in charge, assigned to FBI San Francisco, who manages the field offices for the cyber branch, which is responsible for cyber operations, digital forensics, technical operations, community engagement, and public affairs. With over 16 years in the Bureau, he is a decorated agent who is recognized within the intelligence community as an election cybersecurity and cyber terrorism expert. And who is this rock star? Elvis M. Chan. Wait a minute. Chan? You don't suppose? Nah, couldn't be. To suggest such a thing would be false and racist, wouldn't it? My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on the Big Talker Network at BigTalker.live, where each Saturday at 1 and Sunday at 5, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, and check out my site at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. See you next week.